Each patch has its own meta. Each season has its own meta. But what I didn't realize was how different the meta is depending on what server you are playing on. We all hear about the Korean server playing highly mechanical champions because of the server's low ping. But this got me thinking, what different champions does the Korean server actually play? And then I thought, what different champions do all the other servers actually play? So as a deranged man that's obsessed with League of Legends stats, I naturally gathered all the data for the top 10 picks on every single role on every single patch of this season on every single server. Then put it all in a spreadsheet and checked how often champions appeared in the top 10 most played champions on every patch on every role on every server to create a list of the most played champions during this season for every single server. But what's great for you is that I've done all the boring work. So now we can just go through the results and dissect what are the common champion picks across all servers and what are the niche champions that make each server special. Now remember, these stats are an average across all ranks and across all patches during Season 16, capturing this one point in time. I've also put all of Europe and Latin America together rather than having two different servers, because it looks better when I have 10 servers to talk about. The most picked top laner across 5 different regions is Garen, being played in Brazil, EU West, North America, OCE, and Turkey. And he is also the second most played top laner in 4 other regions, but just barely scraped into the most played top laners in Korea. But the other 5 regions have much more interesting most played champions. Japan plays Mordekaiser the most, Latin America plays Sett the most, and Vietnam plays Aatrox. But these are still quite common top laners. But Korea and Taiwan play completely different champions. Korea plays Yone top the most out of any top laner, which is completely crazy because the only other region that has Yone in their most played is Vietnam, with it in their 4th most picked. But the absolute strangest is Taiwan, who has Gangplank as their most picked top laner for 4 straight patches this season, only to be overtaken by Garen in recent patches. And there is no other region that has Gangplank in their most played champions, making this a massive anomaly. We can see that there are many common champions across all of the regions. Garen, Malphite, Mordekaiser, and Darius appear in every region's most played top laners. Sett appears in 9 regions, with Taiwan being the only region that doesn't play much Sett. Aatrox and Jax are played in 6 out of the 10 regions, but it seems like America just hates them both, as Latin America and North America have neither Aatrox nor Jax appearing at all. In terms of somewhat unique picks, we can see that Yorick is played a lot in Brazil, EU West, Japan, Latin America, and Taiwan. Nasus also appears in half of the regions, being North America, OCE, Latin America, Turkey, and Taiwan. But now we get to dive into the more unique champions. Kayle and Mundo both appear in the exact same regions, being EU, NA, and OCE. This actually leads me to think that these 3 regions lean more towards scaling, making these picks stronger. Meanwhile, Teemo appears a lot in Brazil, NA, and Turkey, while Renekton appears in Korea, Vietnam, and Japan. And in terms of a completely unique champions, we can see that Japan is the only server to have Sion as a popular pick. Latin America likes playing Volibear and Ornn, with no other region picking them. Vietnam picks Jace, and we've already covered that Taiwan plays heaps of Gangplank, being their most picked and completely unique to their server. Looking at the most played jungle champions, we can see that jungle actually has the most champion diversity from region to region, with a total of 23 different champions appearing across all of the regions. The most common jungle champions are Master Yi and Viego, who are both picked on every single server. But Viego is for sure the most popular jungler, as he is the most played on 6 out of the 10 servers. But as for the other servers, there are some interesting picks. In Brazil, Kayn is the most played jungler, while Lee Sin is the most picked in both Korea and Taiwan, and Vietnam randomly has Graves as their most picked. Junglers that appear on the majority of servers are Kha'Zix, who appears on 7 servers, while Kayn, Lee Sin, and Briar appear on 6 servers. Nocturne and Diana appear on half of the servers, and Warwick appears on 4. But here are the somewhat unique champion picks. Shaco is the 3rd most picked champion in Brazil, and also appears in EU West and Turkey. Amumu is picked in EU West, OCE, and NA. But OCE really loves Amumu, being the 4th most played jungler. While Xin Zhao is picked in Japan and Taiwan, in Korea he's actually really popular, being the 5th most played jungler. Very interestingly, Volibear is played in 3 regions, OCE, Latin America, and America, but is quite low pick rate compared to the other most played champions in America and OCE. But in Latin America, Volibear is the 3rd most played jungler, which is absolutely insane considering how niche he is. A similar thing happens when we look at Sylas. He is picked in 2 regions and just barely scraped in to the Vietnam's most popular champions. But when you look at Korea, Sylas is actually the 3rd most played jungler. Vi just barely got into Taiwan's list, but in Korea, she is the 4th most played jungler. It really seems like Korea loves the pro play bruiser junglers like Vi, Xin Zhao, and Lee Sin. Mundo appears in EU West and Japan, but is actually really popular in Japan, being their 4th most played. Jarvan appears in 2 regions, only Taiwan and Vietnam, but is the 3rd most played in Taiwan. But now we come to the completely unique champions. Jax and Echo only appear in Latin America. Malphite only appears in Vietnam, being their 7th most picked. But Zed only appears in Turkey, and he is their 4th most played jungler. But what was the most interesting stat to me was the fact that Lilia, of all champions, appeared in Japan and was their 5th most played jungler. Like, Lilia is already a niche champion on other servers, having around a 3.5% pick rate. But just randomly, in Japan, she gets a 6% plus pick rate almost every patch. In mid lane, we can see that Ahri and Yasuo are by far the most popular mid champions, appearing in every single region, with either one of them taking the #1 spot in every region, except for one region, Latin America, where Veigar of all champions takes the #1 most played mid laner spot. But Veigar is more popular than you might think. Akali, Yone, Malzahar, Veigar, and Zed all appear in most of the servers most picked. It might be because of all the anime they consume, but Japan plays way more Yone than every other region, being the only server where he appears in the top 3 most played champions. Fizz appears in just above half of the server's most played champions. But now that we've gotten the majority out of the way, we can move on to the niche champions. The first niche champion is a very strange anomaly. Although Katarina only appears in just 4 servers, in both Turkey and Brazil, she is the 2nd most played mid laner. So although she is niche, the servers that play her absolutely love Katarina. Sylas also only appears in 4 servers, being Taiwan, Vietnam, Latin America, and Korea. But we can see that Korea's love for Sylas goes beyond the jungle, as he is the 3rd most picked mid laner. Victor appears in 4 servers, and Galio appears in 3. Lux is quite highly picked in both North America and Brazil. Now there are the 1 of 1 unique picks of LeBlanc, Echo, and Diana. But all of these champions only wind up at the bottom of the list for each of their servers. When reviewing the mid lane stats, it felt like this role had a lack of champion diversity. Obviously, there are some outliers, like Katarina being highly picked, Sylas being highly picked, and Veigar being the most played in one region. But there was no one-of-one niche champion picks that were heavily picked on one server. I was waiting to see a Gangplank or Lilia type champion that was heavily picked on one server while being forgotten by the rest, but unfortunately, it just didn't happen. To preface the ADC section, due to the small ADC champion pool, on almost every server, the same champions actually appeared every single patch as the most played. So the pick rate ordering for these champions, especially at the bottom, matters less. Caitlyn is the most picked ADC, being picked on every server and appearing in the #1 spot on 7 servers. In Japan, Miss Fortune is the most played, and she is also very popular, appearing on all servers. But Korea plays Ezreal the most, and Vietnam plays Kai'Sa the most. Jhin and Jinx are the other two champions that appear on every single server alongside Caitlyn and Miss Fortune. The other popular champions are Kai'Sa and Ezreal, appearing across 9 servers. But if we look, Japan doesn't play much Kai'Sa, and Latin America doesn't play much Ezreal. Ashe and Smolder appear on 8 servers, and Vayne is picked in 6 servers. But now we can get to the more unique picks. Lucian is played in 3 servers, but more specifically, in Turkey, Lucian is their 6th most played ADC. Yunara is also played across 3 servers, and Japan actually has Yunara as their 6th most picked champion, even though she's so new. Then we come to the unique picks. Korea plays Sivir much more than other regions, and Latin America loves playing Twitch. But the real standouts are Turkey playing Samira of all champions much more than any other server, and it's not even close. Looking at other servers, Samira sits around a 4 to 6% pick rate, but in Turkey, she's getting between 9 and 11% pick rate every single patch. And the other standout is in Japan, Aphelios is picked way more than other servers, going from around 3.5% pick rate in other regions to an 8% pick rate in Japan. And at the start of the season, when he was strong, he was the most played ADC in Japan, but not in every other region. In support, Nami is the most picked champion in 4 regions. But what's really interesting about this is that although she is highly played in some regions, she isn't present in every region, as Korea, Turkey, and Vietnam all don't play Nami. The actual champions that appear in every region are Lux, who is the most played in Turkey and Latin America, Thresh, who is the most played in Vietnam and Taiwan, Nautilus, who is the most played in Korea, and Morgana, who sits on the low end but appears in every single region. But the strangest thing happens to be on the Japanese server again. Despite being a mid to low pick rate support in 8 other regions comparable to Morgana, randomly, Japan just loves playing Leona. She is the most played support on every single patch except for the first one this season. Other common supports are Nami across 7 regions and Lulu and Seraphine across 6 regions. But now we get to move on to the niche picks. Now, I think it might be all the soccer they're watching, but oddly enough, Europe, Latin America, and Brazil love Milio, and especially Brazil, with Milio being their 5th most played support. Karma is played in Taiwan and Brazil, but Karma is especially played in Korea, where she is the 3rd most played support. It's a similar story for Blitzcrank, as he is quite commonly played in Korea, but is less common but still popular in Turkey and Vietnam. Pyke only appears in 2 regions, being Vietnam and Latin America, but isn't super high pick rate. Same for Yuumi, who appears in Turkey and Taiwan, but isn't high pick rate. But Braum and Sona are completely different stories, both appearing in only 2 regions. But NA loves playing Sona, as she is their 3rd most played support. Same with Japan, who loves playing Braum and is also their 3rd most played support. But now we can move on to the unique region picks. Senna only appears in NA, while Zyra only appears in Japan, but they are both the least played. But now we get kind of weird with some champions that I did not expect to appear in these lists. In Turkey, they play Swain, but not even like scraping in. He is more played than both Blitz and Yuumi. But the strangest of all is Vietnam. I don't know what is in the water, but they just seem to love playing mage supports. Brand and Xerath only appear in Vietnam. And again, they're not just barely scraping in. Brand is their 5th most played support, and Xerath is their 6th most played support. Furthering this mage support narrative, Lux is their 2nd most picked, and Morgana is their 4th most picked. And Vietnam has no enchanters in their most played champions. It seems like the support meta in Vietnam might just be completely different to every other server. I may have missed some interesting things in all the stats, so if you see them, be sure to let me know in the comments below. But I just find these kind of stats so fun. Every single one of these lists is unique. No server has the exact same meta champions being picked every single patch. Every server just leans towards certain champions due to server culture, but still comes together to play common champions across all servers. It's also so interesting to see culture form and players shape each other's perspectives on the game, the same way a bronze player might see Illaoi as being impossible to play against, while a challenger player sees Illaoi as a grief champion. I would also be interested in doing this again, but taking champion pick rates from Master or Diamond Plus, just to cut out the common low elo champions like Garen, to see what high rank diversity is like. Or comparing these stats in 6 months to see if some picks have stayed the same and how the meta has evolved on every single server. Also, I've recently been streaming on Twitch, so if you want more content from me, go follow me there at twitch.tv/muckinoce.